Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're so happy that you're here. We're so glad you're taking time out of your day to learn how to be a board member. It certainly is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. We wanted to have an opportunity, first of all, to hear from Corey.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Sam. So I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen. Awesome. So again, I'm Corey and I'm from the Capacity Building Institute. If this is your first time here, I want to do a quick overview about who we are, our vision, what we offer, some brief testimonials, information about the series, our team, and how you can sign up for more amazing events. So CBI was founded by Kristina Inrig, who is inspired to help build better leaders in the environmental sector in Canada, with the goal of strengthening small shop environmental organizations so they can sustain themselves, grow, and fulfill their missions. CBI aims to collectivize and spread knowledge throughout the sector. We have a vision of training 10,000 leaders of small shop nonprofit environmental organizations in Canada within the next 10 years. While this may seem like a lofty goal for some, we're well on our way with our 4 different training programs. The first of which is the Capacity Building Certificate Program, which is our flagship program. This program is designed for those who have experience in the sustainability sector, so managers and executive directors, and other people who are looking to get additional leadership experience. It runs for 6 months, and each month we cover a different module. We cover topics like financial management and fund development, governance and board development, volunteer engagement, human resources, communications and outreach, risk management and legal issues, and leadership and organizational culture. Our next biggest program is the intern training program, which is for those who are just getting their foot in the door in the sustainability sector. We've hired over 55 interns this year, and not only that, we have matched them with different intern placements and given each intern a mentor to work with. We also have a fundraising intensive course, of course, this series, and we are developing an impact investment course as well. We really value our feedback, and here's an amazing testimonial from Mara Shaw, who's the Executive Director of the National Farmers Union. She felt the certificate program provided her with practical tools, inspiring speakers, and one-on-one coaching that helped expand her organization's capacity. We also have a testimonial from Ashna, who works at Biosphere EcoCities Canada, and she felt the internship training program gave her a better understanding of effective fundraising, grant writing, media content, partnership forming, public speaking, and youth engagement. As a whole, she felt this program taught her more about the nonprofit sector and provided her with everything that was required to be successful in her new placement. So our 2 main programs, the Capacity Building Certificate Program and Intern Training Program, are quite time intensive. They're 6 months and cover a lot of information. And we know not everyone has that type of time, which is why we wanted to come up with something for everyone, which is the Capacity Series. The main structure of this series is we wanted to help those who struggle with working efficiently with constraints like limited labor and time, and helping people transition to leadership roles within the environmental organization. We also want to help organizations improve existing members' capabilities and governance structures. So this series is free, online, and only once a month. We alternate between 2 topics: how to be an executive director, where we focus on leadership and management, organizational development, and strategic planning. We also have our series today, which is how to be a board member, where we'll talk about things like fundraising, governance, and various board roles. We have incredible trainers. You just heard very briefly from Sam Laprade, who's a certified fundraising executive. Sam has been working in the sustainability sector for more than 28 years and provides training on fund development, board relations, engagement, and implementation strategies. She's also the host of 2 radio shows, the Sam Laprade Show, as well as An Hour to Give. We'll also be hearing today from Kristina Inrig, who is the president of the Sustainable Capacity Foundation. Her main nonprofit roles include networking, partnership development, fundraising, NGO management, and governance. Next year, during our series, we'll be hearing from Barb King, who is the Executive Director of Watersheds Canada. Barb has over 20 years of management experience within the sustainability sector and provides training support for other organizations on management, youth mentorship, executive leadership, and governance. Last but not least, we have Alex Keenan, who in her previous career worked as legal counsel for First Nations in both Ontario and Quebec. She then went on to start her own business, Stage Light Communication, which provides communication strategy, training, and facilitation for organizations and professionals. I want to take a quick pause here and ask, what would you like to see during the Capacity Series? This is our second event that we're hosting, and we're always looking for improvement. So if you have any questions during the session, feel free to drop it in the Q&A chat. If not, you can email us at info@capacitybuilding.ca. We couldn't hold this amazing event without our board members or our partners, as well as our core team. If you're interested in more training events, you can find us at capacitybuilding.ca/events. Thank you so much for your time.
How many times have we said that? I'm on mute. Oh my heavens. Thank you so much, Corey. That was beautifully done. We wanted to speak about a number of different topics today, of course, related to how to be a board member. And I wanted to introduce not only the founder of this incredible organization, but my friend, Kristina Inrig. Hello, Ingrid. Hello, Kristina.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
Everything now. Good heavens.
It's all good. You can call me anything you want.
Oh, well, thank you. I wanted to really congratulate you on the opportunity to have an event like this. Of course, last time we got together, we spoke about how to be an executive director, and I think those are just topics we don't really talk about a lot. But it's important to sort of pause and think about it, because sometimes we're asked to be a board member and we don't even know what that means. So let's start off a little bit, Kristina, and let me ask you this. You know, what do you think the biggest job of a board member is?
Well, I think there are a lot of jobs of a board member, but I mean, today what we really want to focus in on how to make it more accessible for people, because you're right. Everybody is often asked to be a board member, and they're not all the time we're sure what are we signing up for, and what can we do to really be strategic in terms of boards. So that is really why we wanted to have this two-part series. Focus the first, as you mentioned, on how to be an executive director. And this series every 2 months will focus on how to be a board member. Because really, I think these board members are sort of the secret to the nonprofit sector that we don't talk about enough, right? Every organization you learn about, every time you see a spokesperson out there talking on behalf of their organization, they are, supported and represented behind them by all kinds of board members, usually 5 to 12 people who've taken up the commitment, and usually for them it's a multi-year commitment to be part of it. And that is my answer to your question. The most important thing I think a board member can do is commit to their organization and to provide that commitment to be there behind the scenes, and sometimes publicly, representing their organization and being a part of the fabric of governance for the nonprofit sector.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. I often think about board members, and I think of a mantra: time, talent, and treasure. How do you apply that, definitely in your experience, to board members?
Oh, that's a really great way to frame it, for sure, as 3 priority items that board members should be thinking about. So from a time point of view, I think the most important thing board members need to do is show up at the board meetings and be present. And whenever there are opportunities for reviewing documents or key strategies ahead of time, doing that. But being present and showing up in terms of time or committee meetings, that's a really important priority for board members. And I know there are many board members on this call today, many who are incredible board members of their organizations. And sometimes it feels like you're the only one on your board really pulling everything together and trying to keep things together. So I really just want to encourage those of you out there who are on their boards to really keep up the great work. And this work is so valuable and so important. And that time commitment that you've made is so valuable. Okay, was it treasure next or talent next? What was your order?
Talent.
Okay, talent. Well, I mean, there's no question that most of the talent within an organization starts with the board of directors. So this amazing group of diverse people who have different backgrounds, who have different experiences and stories to share, like, you are what makes your organization so incredible. So I hope that you'll virtually pat yourself on the back and remember that what you're doing is so important, bringing your skills and your experience. You know, many board members have full-time jobs outside of this work that they're doing, and then they commit that extra time to show up at those board meetings, to show up when there are events and opportunities that call for a board representative. And that really, really matters. Like, we would not have the kind of grassroots action and strategy going on in our country if it wasn't for the hundreds and thousands of people who serve on boards that truly make a difference. So I can't say enough about board members. They're my absolute favorite people. And I really, really encourage you to keep up that important work, even when it feels like, you know, you're like, why am I still working with this board, right? We've all had those moments where, like, what are we doing? And you are incredibly talented people out there. Like, I am always so enriched. So I learn so much when I take that time to get to know my board members and get to know the community. So that talent is really, really true. And when it comes to treasurer, I'm just going to put it out there, because I've been a board member and I am a board member with many organizations. I really think that part of your role as a board member is to contribute back. You know, you are contributing your time, but we often talk about 100% board giving, and everyone feels a little awkward talking about this concept. But for me, it's like, whether you give $10 or $10,000, it doesn't matter. But if you can give back to the organization that you're supporting, it is so helpful for the executive director and for the team when they can say that they have 100% board giving. I really, really think we underestimate that. And actually, what I've noticed in the last year is that there are several grant applications that ask you the question outright. They say, do you have 100% board giving? And you really, as an executive director, you need to be honest about that. So if you don't have your board contributing in one way or another, I just saw someone dropped off the call, so maybe they didn't like that advice, but I really think that we can give in terms of this, of our capacity and our work that we're passionate about. But at the same time, the giving really comes from the talent and the time that you're contributing to the organization. That's so valuable.
I agree. And I think what I always love to hear is that it's a gift that's meaningful for you. And one of the greatest things I think a board member can do is become a monthly donor, which allows that sustainability to continue and, you know, really encourage others to become monthly donors as well. So, but yeah, definitely something that's meaningful in your own world is a great way to do that. Board governance. I mean, we could talk for you and I could talk for about 4.5 days about board governance, but I'm going to summarize it in one sentence that someone said to me once, and I thought it was brilliant. It's board members should have nose in and hands out.
Interesting.
What does that mean to you when I say that to you?
Okay. Yeah. No, I think, you know, from a governance lens, and I think that's one of the challenges of boards, is you don't always know what type of board you're on, right? You can be on a working board where you are a little more hands-on and taking part in all the day-to-day actions. And you can also be on a board where it is very much governance and strategy focused, and therefore your hands are off in the sense that you're not involved in the day-to-day operations, but you're more focused on the strategy and taking a bird's eye view of the organization. Taking an evaluation approach, for example, to how successful you are as an organization in your outreach or in your programs as a whole as they fit together. So I do really think that there is a certain point in the life of an organization that they might transition from going from a working board into a governance board. And at that point, when they're in a governance seat, that really should be a focus on strategy at that point. And what better way to do that than the strategic plan? So I really think that a lot of groups have underestimated the value of having an up-to-date strategic plan, and one that maybe covers 3 to 5 years, but that the board is actually following on a very consistent basis, like thinking about how can we take this strategy and really go to the next level with our organization. It's not about having a strategy that is there one day and then 5 years later you look back at it and be like, oh, what happened with that? For me as an executive director of small shops, you know, one of the things I really tried to focus on with my boards was how do we take this strategy and then look at it on a regular, consistent basis? So we call that our strategic plan updates to the board. So where we look at our goals that we set over a 5-year period, and then each year within our annual work plan, try to say, what have we accomplished? What do we need to change? What did we learn that we didn't know? And that is the strategy and governance piece that I think the board can take a look at, that needs to happen at that higher level from within the board of directors. And so keeping a pulse on, number one, do we have a strategic plan? Number two, when is the last time we looked at our strategic plan? When's the last time we had an update to see if any of those strat planning concepts are still relevant today? And then the measurement piece. So is there something to measure in your plan? Are you measuring against your outreach capacity or your dollars raised, or if the organization has more financial sustainability, like whatever those goals are for you in your strategic plan, how are we doing in terms of actually measuring against them? And I don't want it to feel like there's more and more and more work to do all the time on the board's shoulders. But to me, the strategy piece would be in the top 3 of what a board should be focusing on.
100%. I feel the exact same way. And I think asking some of these questions that we're talking about, like, are you a board that's nose in and hands out, or are you all in? Like, I think your board experience becomes better the more you know the very first time you sit at that table.
It's amazing how many times I've done an interview with or a conversation with a board, and if you ask people to tell me what type of board they are, whether they're a working board, a blended board, or a governance board, it's amazing how many times you would get completely different answers. Yeah. So it's actually surprising that we're on boards, but we don't all agree about the type of board we're supposed to be. So getting that, together collectively as a consensus, it sounds like a pretty simple step, but I am always amazed when I ask that question, are you a working board? Well, if 5 out of 10 people say yes, and 4 out of 10 people say they're a governance board, and the last person thinks it's a blended board, well, then you've got some work to do as a board to figure out who you are. In order to measure whether you're operating successfully, the first thing to know is how are you supposed to be operating?
We've talked a lot about boards, of course, is the big word of the day. Let's talk about onboarding the board and what that means for not only us as staff, in many cases, sometimes volunteers, even in these staff roles, but what that means from an organization's perspective, but also the role that board members play in that onboarding.
Well, that is my number 2 tip of the day. The number 1 tip is around strategy. And the number 2 tip is around, you thought exactly what I was thinking, Sam, but it's around succession planning for the board and board succession. So that includes onboarding, but it also includes always be thinking when you're on your board of what comes next, and always be thinking of who is going to be part of this team moving forward. And for many of you, if you're federally incorporated and you recently changed your bylaws or followed some of the new federal changes for the Not-for-Profit Act, you'll know that there's a lot more turnover with boards now than maybe there used to be. It used to be that you could have people join a board and they'd stay on the board for 20, 30, 40 years. Nowadays, most people will stay on a board for no longer than 6 years. And even that, if they're doing 3 terms of 2 years each, even that is the exception rather than the rule. So you always need to be thinking about, how do we keep some corporate memory on our board? Because we're all going to be within 6 years transitioning out of our board in one way or the other. So that piece around corporate memory, around board succession, has to be in the conversation all the time. It can't just be happening every few years. It needs to be happening every year and all the time. And so one way to do that is to make sure you have a really strong onboarding board orientation kit that includes the conversation of succession right from the beginning. And the second way is to make sure that at all of your board meetings, you're thinking ahead and kind of knowing where people stand in terms of their terms. Not that you want to spend your whole life on the board thinking about the life after you leave the board, but it should be something that is top of mind, because you don't want to be scrambling to wonder, where are my board members going to come from? And if you have a system in place where you're always kind of thinking ahead to board succession, then I really think it can make it less painful when it comes to that time. Now, there's a few boards that I've been on where they actually dropped below the legal minimum requirement, where either I've connected with them or I've come in and supported them. And maybe their bylaws said that they had to have 5 board members, but they dropped down to 3 board members. And in those situations where you're starting to have like legal limbo, that particular board that I'm talking about had to meet every 60 days and hold a members meeting to try to like get itself on track. And it took them, I think, 6 months before they were able to stabilize and bring in the right number of people. So it's really critical when you're getting low in terms of your board numbers, if that's one of the problems that you're facing, that you're really building in succession planning well ahead so that you're not having that kind of challenge when it comes to board succession and strategy. And then the board chair, the other piece to succession is also the positions on the board, so that you're making sure that people have a chance to kind of build up into those different positions. We often joke that the vice chair of the board is the position where, you know, you don't really have to do anything, but it actually should really be the position for the person who's going to be the next chair. So in a way, they're the chairperson in training, and they should be prepping for that. So the more we can try to fill those roles authentically with people who we know are going to come and take into a leadership role in the future, that's only going to help from an onboarding and a succession point of view. So I really think that as a community and as a group of organizations, we should be focused on board succession way more than we are, and always bringing in new people and giving them a year to get kind of the boards under their belts. Because it's really, you know how many groups I've been involved in where they call me up and they're like, oh, we're looking for a new board chair and we're going to pull them off the street to chair our organization. And I'm kind of like, a board chair is not going to be as effective if their first day on the job, they're suddenly in the chairperson's role or chair. So I really do feel like you want to have board succession that includes the officer roles as well.
Yep, beautifully said, Kristina. Let's talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion. You know, when I think about succession planning, as you talked about, a lot of people, you know, sort of have a concept about their board that they're the ones that are going to try and encourage someone to take their seat after, you know, sort of a fill your seat sort of concept. And I think it's really important that the lens on this is diversity inclusion, so that our community is truly represented as Canadians.
Yeah, absolutely. That this idea of fill your seat is I've heard that a lot, and it's the concept, from what I understand, of that as you're leaving the board, you're responsible for filling your seat with someone else who will come in. And I wish that were the case with a lot of boards, but I know it's not. But absolutely, I think that diversity and inclusion is so important right now, and we should be really focused on how do we build strong governance by bringing in a diversity of perspectives at the board level. So that is absolutely something that every board should be focused on, and making sure that if everyone on the board comes from the same background, has the same educational experience, from the same culture, you know, all of that stuff, it's not going to make for the richness of opportunity that you would have if you have really diverse perspectives collectively as a board. So I really encourage people to be thinking about that when it comes to recruitment. And that means usually looking outside the normal, you know, suspects of where you would find board members, right? Reaching out to find people who care about sustainability from all walks of life and really encouraging them. Also from an age point of view, like I've got some boards that I get to know that everybody in the room, I feel like I'm the kid in the room, even though I'm almost 40. So I really think that from an age point of view, you want to have diversity in terms of who's on your board from an age point of view, also from rural and urban point of view, from cultural perspectives. You just really want to find all kinds of different ways to really bring together diverse points of view from a governance. And just the fact that you have so many different people representing different communities coming together means that a lot of the board time is spent, you know, building that common thread, going back to the strategy perspective, building that common perspective of here's what we're focused on, and here's what we're going to do together, and here's how we're going to tackle this work as an organization.
Mm-hmm. And I know, you know, you've alluded to it as well, there, you know, being on a board includes a lot of meetings, and this might be a bit of a silly question, but I think it's a really important one, because certainly in my 3 decades, I've seen this done really well, and I've seen it done really poorly. And that is really getting ready for a board meeting. Like, what should you do? I can't tell you how many times, you know, staff work their butts off getting that kit together for a board member. And then the board member shows up and goes, oh, did you have a budget, or is there financials? And meanwhile, it was sent to them a week in advance, right? So, and I'm not slamming board members, everyone's busy. But I think the better prepared we all are when we come to the table, the best use of our time.
It's literally like you took the words out of my mouth, Sam, because my third big item after strategy and board succession is around board meetings. I really think this is the critical issue that we as boards are not, you know, addressing very effectively. And first thing I want to say about board meetings is make them fun. Like, you know, we have so many crappy meetings that we have to go to in life. Make the board meetings fun. People are doing this as volunteers on their spare time. And for me, when I spend an evening, like right now, I'm not having dinner with my family because I want to be here talking about boards together with this group of people who are part of the sustainability sector across the country. And I'm happy to be here. But every time I go to a board meeting, I like to think about the fact that I'm trading time with my family for this moment that I'm here at this board meeting. So let's make it worthwhile and enjoyable. I'll tell you a story about one board meeting I was at, and people got so angry at this board meeting. Like, there was a contentious issue, and fair enough. Your board should not always be yes, 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 yes. Like, I don't think that board should always be about just agreeing with everything the executive director says. That's not the sign of a strong board. On the other side of the spectrum, conflict for the sake of conflict is also not helpful and doesn't help move things forward. I remember one of my early board meetings as an executive director. I was sitting in a room and two people were having this massive fight, and their faces went all red like lobsters, like their face turned red, and spit flew across the room and landed on a piece of paper. And I was just like, this is not the kind of board meeting that I want to be at. Like, the culture of this board meeting is so hostile. And I don't know if any of you are dealing with conflict in your boards right now. And I know it's like a secret thing we don't like to talk about if there's personality conflicts or someone dominating the conversation all the time or whatever. But just that moment when I take a step back and I think about it, and I think about that piece of spit flying across the room and landing on my page in front of me, I was just like, okay, we need to be thinking about how can we be life-giving and enriching in these conversations, and a lot less about how we're fighting for the sake of fighting, or standing firmly for something we believe in, but digging our heels in so deep that no one else can have a chance to share. So I kind of went a little bit off track in terms of from the perspective of board preparation, but the point is, board meetings are so important. So do a critical analysis of your board meetings. Like, how are they flowing? Are you always starting late and ending over time? That's stressful for people too. If you're having a challenge in terms of time and what you should be focused on at the board level, if you're finding you're scheduled your board meeting for an hour and a half and you really need 2 hours, then you need to change up the schedule so that you are doing it within 2 hours is the idea. Because I think it's stressful for everybody if they're expecting one thing and what happens over and over again is something different. Mm-hmm. Then preparation, like you talked about, Sam. So there should be a package going out to all of your board meetings a week ahead of time. And if you have a staff member, like an executive director, or even a coordinator, or in some cases, even an intern who is the only staff member of your organization, that's okay. It doesn't matter who it is. And if you don't have any staff, then maybe it's the board chair, or maybe it's a position on your board that's just about helping pull together the agenda and the past minutes and kind of pulling that together. It could be the secretary, could be somebody else on the board. So somebody's got to send out this package. So first of all, whose responsibility is that? Making sure you kind of know who it's going to be. And then once that package is sent out, in good faith, all of the board members need to take some time in preparation to review it. I've heard of some people who talked about having a consent agenda can really be a great way to move meetings forward. So a consent agenda is where you put certain reports in for the day, but you don't actually pull them onto the agenda and discuss them unless someone has a conflict or an issue that they want to raise. This can be potentially a way to save time with the meeting. If you're always going through the same report over and over and over again, it's taking up the majority of your meeting, then having a consent agenda might be helpful. But even if you don't do that, again, making sure that you're not just going through the motions of always the same thing, the ED report, the past minutes, not in that order, obviously, the financial report, and then not really getting to any critical decisions that need to be made. It's important that you structure your meetings so that you are able to kind of address those critical issues. And again, going back to what I said at the beginning, make them fun, make there be some opportunity for learning and sharing. Aren't we all just a little bit zoomed out right now? Like I spent my day today, like 6 hours straight in Zoom meetings without a break. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of Zoom meetings for one day. So I think we need to find ways to, make these meetings fun, but also get the work done that we need to get done, like not waste time either.
Yeah, beautifully said, for sure. And I think another really, really big point of that is, first of all, I love consent agendas. I think it's awesome. One thing I'd like to add there is I think using board meetings, whether they're once a month or quarterly, whatever the decision is of the organization and the board, is to always have at least 5 minutes to show any kind of impact. So, I used to love doing like a little infographic, like this is how many new donors we have, or this is a thank you note we received, or this is, some impact or some feedback we received from a participant of a program, something to show that the needle is moving. Because I think it's important for board members, not only are we asking them to inspire their communities, but we need to inspire those board members.
I totally agree with you. I think that hearing testimonials from people who are taking part in activities with the organization can be really valuable. And I just want to go back to your point you said about like monthly or quarterly. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm just going to put it out there for the world today. I don't think boards need to meet monthly. I think that's just too often. And so if your board is meeting monthly, in my opinion, it doesn't give you very much time to get anything done between the next board meeting. And so I understand if you're a working board and it's all volunteers and the only people who are meeting are the board, I can understand why you might meet monthly. But once you start having staff and a team, and once you're trying to build your organization's capacity, we're not giving enough time for the work to get done if we're spending our whole month just preparing for the next board meeting. So I would challenge you as boards out there to think about how often does our board really need to meet? And I think that you should be meeting every 2 months or even every 3 months on a quarterly basis as the frequency of board meetings. Because I think you'll find you can move the needle a lot further, and you can have subcommittees who actually meet and get things done in between board meetings. Maybe you have an executive committee who are a couple people on the board who can meet and make quick decisions and take quick action, and that group meets monthly. But whatever it is, I think that there are different structures that you need. And if you're just meeting monthly because you've always met monthly, I would just challenge you to maybe think that that is not necessarily the way we need to go. And I know that might be controversial, and I know some of you on this call do meet monthly, and I would just challenge you to take a second look at that.
Mm-hmm. There are people going hallelujah too, by the way. Myself, for instance. I think it's a really important conversation as well to think about when you're at a board meeting and you want to ask a question. I think sometimes board members think, is it appropriate I ask this here? Should I, what's the role of the chair? Should this be something, is this a staff question? Is this a board question? And sometimes I find board members that are, the most engaged really have a hard time understanding what the rules are at the table when they first join a board. And sometimes the questions that come from new board members are the elephant in the room.
Absolutely. I think questions are really important, and giving that space for questions to be asked. And I also think, looking at who's talking during a board meeting, and if the whole board meeting is spent, and I'm guilty of this too at some of my board meetings, where I spend a good 40 minutes of my time talking about my ED report. Well, you know what? It would have been better if that had been more of a consent agenda item. And instead, I figured out what are the key questions that I really need the board's input on, and then focus the conversation on some of those key questions and getting input and feedback from the people around the room. Mm-hmm. So I do find I have to audit myself sometimes to look at the meeting and say, and I know some of my interns will be rolling their eyes here because I talk a lot, but it's sort of like, am I spending the time dominating the conversation as the executive director or potentially as the board chair in situations where I'm a board chair? And how can we change that so that the people in the room are sharing information? And also, I found that with Zoom and with digital meetings, there are all kinds of different ways now to share information that can really bring perspectives from all over the place. So for example, you might want to do a poll during your meeting, and that can bring a lot of responses that people may not stand up and say this or that, but they might respond to a poll. I have found jam boards and Miro boards to be super effective. If you have a topic you want to talk about and ask people to put in little sticky notes, I'm always impressed by how much diversity of opinion and conversation or thought can come out of that, rather than just asking people to verbally raise their hand and speak. So we should always be thinking about different learning styles, and also using the chat. The chat function can be pretty incredible in a board meeting to allow people to articulate what they're thinking about as well.
Speaking about the chat, look at that. We have had
Great segue.
Great segue. We've had two fantastic questions come in. I'm going to talk about the first one. What do you think is the biggest barrier for people who don't join a board? And they've got a couple of ideas here. You know, are they intimidated? Are they afraid it's going to take up too much time? Maybe no one asks them. What are the barriers in your world? Kristina?
I definitely think it could be all of those things, but I think when I'm asked to be on a board, one of the things that I really try to evaluate is like, what is the commitment that I'm making? Because I don't want to be a board member without making a solid commitment, going back to that word I used at the beginning. And so what kind of time commitment is it going to take from me in terms of how many meetings? Like if they tell me they're meeting monthly, you can pretty much guarantee that I'm never going to join your board. Just putting it out there, because you're meeting way too frequently, and how can we get any work done? So to me, I would not want to be on a board where it's meeting too often and doesn't give us a chance to get any work done in between board meetings. How can we be strategic and taking a bird's eye view if we're constantly digging into the details and not giving ourselves time to build strategy? So I think that for someone who's maybe never been on a board before, not realizing that boards are the secret to the sustainability sector is, I think it's a hidden thing, which is why we want to talk about it here, because people don't realize that what makes the organization tick is not the executive director standing up and giving all the speeches. They're important, they're part of the fabric, but equally as important are those board members who help keep the operation running and who help keep the strategy in place and who hold a candle for the key priorities that are happening in the sector. So I feel like one barrier is that people don't realize how important this work really is. And to me, it is an important calling. It's one of the most important things you can spend your time doing, is serving on a board. It is a service. It's a sign of service in our community. And so I think that it is one of the things that we don't realize is how important it is. And we just think, oh, it's another volunteer thing. Oh, it's another job I'm asked to do. But it actually is an active service that I think we all personally, I think everybody should commit to one board or another, whether it's environmental sector or something else. I think it's part of what keeps our society moving. And I think we should all play a role in boards in one way or another. So I think there's lots of barriers for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We have two other questions. I'd love to get through these. Second question, my board struggles with understanding what needs full board approval and what needs just a few approvals. Do you have any advice?
Yes, my advice is that you need a really good governance policy, because a governance policy should set up what is the board's domain and what is not. And it should make it very clear in terms of like, these are the situations where you need full board approval. So for example, if you approve the budget as a whole, and by the way, I do a workshop separately on base and expanded budgets and how to create an awesome budget that will give you flexibility for your organization. We'll probably cover that in a different month. But if you have the budget approved from the beginning, then each day-to-day expenditures should not be going to the board. Like I hear about people submitting their reimbursements to the board, and it's like, oh, I have to wait to the next board meeting for that. And I'm like, seriously, you have to wait for the next board meeting to approve something that's already in the budget that we know you're going to cover anyway. You've already agreed to it. So obviously, if something is outside of the budget, that has to come back to the board for discussion. But once something is there in the budget and the budget is approved and you're following it, you shouldn't be bringing every single expense item like that to the board. It's a waste of the board's time. The governance policy should set up some pretty clear structure in terms of when it's the board's decision and when it's not. And the other big point to this is really a question of like what your structure is as an organization. If you have an executive director, then there's this special thing called executive authority that you need to really tangibly lay out. What is in the realm of the ED's responsibility and what is not. So for example, if you're a small shop, but you do have an ED, then one of the first things you should know is that your staff, they are all the responsibility of the executive director, except for the executive director. The only staff member that the board should be hiring and paying attention to is the ED. Everyone else on the board, everyone else on the staff team, they are the responsibility of the executive director. And so again, if you have board meetings coming up where boards are debating like who should we hire, how are we going to fill our summer student positions, you know, to me it's like if you have an ED, we should not even be having these conversations. So again, it is a little bit varied depending on if you're a working board or a governance board, and it's a little bit different if you have an ED or you don't have an ED. But as a general rule of thumb, I think a strong governance policy should set that out.
I mean, I know we could talk about this forever. We have one more question, and I know we wanted to bring in Jody Chow as well to our conversation. So I'm going to do one more question with you, and it's a really good one, actually. Can you speak to the due diligence one should do if asked to join a board around financial risk and insurance for board members who may be liable if the organization is sued, and of course, part of the fiduciary responsibilities, etc. Can you speak to that, Kristina?
Yeah, I mean, I always get asked when, from potential board members whether or not we have insurance in place. So the kind of insurance you should be looking for as a potential board member is called D&O, Directors and Officers Liability Insurance. So it's often asked, do you have D&O insurance? And that's almost like a prerequisite for some people joining a board. And so there's no question about that in terms of asking whether that's in place. In terms of fiduciary responsibility and financial risk, I would say, if I was asked to join a board, I would ask for a copy of their strategic plan and their last 3 years of financial statements. And I would look at those as a way to evaluate the organization. Now, just because an organization is struggling doesn't mean I would necessarily say no. I'm thinking of one board that I joined about 15 years ago, and they had been in a deficit for 4 consecutive years. Now, normally you might say, I'm not going to touch that board with a 10-foot pole, but I really loved what that board was doing in terms of one of their projects, and I wanted to help them get out of that deficit, which thankfully we did, and they've never run a deficit since, which is great news. But I want to be informed what I'm getting into. I don't want to be suddenly on the board and have a surprise coming. So you should be able to read where an organization is at based on those financial statements and by looking at the strategic plan for clues. And then if you're still not sure, I would say there's 2 people you want to interview. You want to interview the board chair and you want to interview the executive director. And based on those conversations, if there's any red flags that come up, again, not to say that we shouldn't join boards where there's struggle, because the reality is all of our organizations are struggling at some point or another and in some time. And it's not that we want to stay away from boards that are having financial hardship, because frankly, look at how we are right now in terms of, post-pandemic, or I guess still right in the pandemic, but so much funding has been cut to environmental organizations during this pandemic. And so there is a struggle going on in terms of financial sustainability. So it's not to say we stay away from that, but we just need to go into it being informed. So those would be the kinds of things I would ask for. Do you have D&O insurance? Let me see your strategic plan and send me the last 3 years of financial statements, and possibly an interview with the board chair and the executive director.
Thank you so much. Very, very helpful, Kristina Inrig. And we wanted to invite the one and only Jody Chow. How are you, Jody?
Hi. Oh, right. I am present. What a great discussion. Hannah, if it's possible, can you share your screen? Great. So good evening, everyone. My name is Jody Chow. I am the communications coordinator of Eco Internships, and I hope everyone gained a little bit more insight into how to be a board member, as did I. And here I have a quick overview on the topics I will be expanding on. So by the end of this presentation, I hope everyone will know who we are, what we do, why we do it, some of our intern testimonials, and how to contact us. So ECO Internships at its core is to provide staffing support to environmental nonprofits. We collaborate with a variety of partners and funder organizations to make hiring process simple and efficient. And since 2017, we have supported over 90 interns with 34 environmental nonprofit organizations across Canada. And just 4 years ago, we had 4 interns at 5 organizations. And every year afterwards, we made great efforts to build capacity and expand our reach to help these small environmental nonprofits with their mission and projects by hiring interns. And just this year alone, we actually achieved 2 huge milestones. We tripled the number of participating organizations at 34 and quadrupled the number of interns at 57, as well as being federally incorporated as of April. And this work was possible through the Intern Support Program, which was launched under Sustainable Eastern Ontario in 2017. The program gained momentum and started to expand. It eventually became its own entity, which is now known as ECO Internships. And this program is a 26-week paid internship program, which has 2 major components: a mandatory 3-week online training course through the Capacity Building Institute, and ongoing training and mentorship. And this training program consists of 6 topics that will prepare the interns for their internships. Some of the topics include nonprofit basics, fundraising 101, communications and public speaking, career development, self-care, and leadership. And to further support our interns, we have mentors who are alumni of the Intern Support Program that have continued on into the environmental sector. And throughout the internship, mentors are required to have bi-weekly or monthly check-ins with their interns to ensure that their internship is in a very positive matter. And as a mentor, it's more of a supporter and coach role than a manager/supervisor. And here we have some of our current interns. We have Gary Churchill. He is an intern at Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability. He said that the internship program was valuable because it helped him fast track his professional development in a way that he simply couldn't do in a short amount of time. He also received a plethora of job-specific skills that will carry on into his future opportunities in the nonprofit sector. Then we have Jacqueline. She's currently an intern at Tucker House. She said that the intern training program helped her establish these theoretical theories into more practical sense, and therefore she's able to complete her work deliverables at Tucker House. And next we have some of our alumni. So we have Devanshi. She was an intern at Canadian Environmental Network, and she said that the internship helped her develop important skills like fundraising, networking, communications, and volunteer management that will help further her career. She now works at the Clean Air Partnership. And then we have Nicole, who was an intern at Peace and Environmental Resource Center. She said that the training program was great because it taught her a lot of different topics. And now she knows the ins and outs of fundraising for a nonprofit. Here, I just want to say a quick thank you to our partners and funders for making this work possible. And for those who are interested in hiring interns for 2022, you can apply through a website. I'll also put our website in the chat right now so you guys have direct access to it. And then if you have more questions regarding the intern support program or just who we are as an organization, feel free to email us at info@ecointernships.ca. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and I look forward to hearing from everyone.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate, of course, you sponsoring today's session, Jody, Eco Interns. It's really appreciated very much for your commitment to our event tonight. We do have about 9 minutes left. Kristina, did you want to dive into another topic or two?
Yeah, I just want to quickly, again, echo what Sam said, to thank Eco Internships for being part of the session today, and to let boards out there know that there's some real opportunity if you're struggling to maintain capacity from an HR perspective, that there really is some great funding out there right now through wage subsidy programs. And Eco Internships, as you just saw, has successfully helped many organizations bring in staff. And it's not to take away from the fact that you want to have some permanent staff with your organization whenever possible, but it's amazing how effective a small organization can be with one executive director or part-time coordinator, and then 2 interns who come and stay for 6 to 8 months over the course of a year, and to really build that organization up. So I would really just encourage you, if you have never experienced having an intern before, and if you're interested in a placement for 2022, check out that website that Jody shared and place in the chat, and reach out to this great organization to find out more. I know personally I've been involved in many different internship positions related to the groups that I've worked with, and it's just incredible, some of the young people, the skills they bring to the table, and it's really exciting to see how that comes together. So I really encourage you to check that out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We do have about 5 minutes left. Kristina, did you want me to dive into another hot topic when it comes to how to be a board member?
Yeah, sure. But maybe before we do that, I'll just let people know what's going to happen next. So as Corey mentioned at the beginning of the session, we are going to be alternating between these 2 really important topics, how to be an executive director and how to be a board member. So every month we will alternate between those 2 topics. The idea here is we're focused on the environmental sustainability small shop sector across Canada. So we want to continue to grow these numbers, and these videos will go live. After the live session, they will go up on our YouTube channel. So we encourage you to share them with your board if they're looking for more focused content. We will be covering more detailed topics. Like I mentioned earlier, this conversation around budgets. So probably we'll have a session sometime next year on how to build a budget for your organization. It'll be interesting to see whether I frame that one from the point of view of the board or the ED, but we can talk about that next year. But there'll be other topics like how to be a chairperson, how to be a treasurer, what to look for in the treasurer role. So we're actually going to go in depth into some of these different positions. But exciting for me is that next month, actually for the next 2 sessions, so for our December session and our January session, I'm actually going to be turning the tables on Sam, our wonderful hostess, so that we can hear from her perspective. So not only is Sam an incredible host in both her radio life and also here with us at the Capacity Building Institute, but she is a seasoned fundraiser, has many more years and experience fundraising than I do. And so I'm going to be turning the tables on her to do interviews from an ED perspective, how to really finish the year off strong and build capacity financially within your organization. That'll be the topic for how to be an executive director in December. And then in January, we'll be talking about how can we get boards involved in fundraising and what's the board's role in fundraising. And I know Sam has some great tips and ideas for that. So Sam, any teasers you want to share with people before we take any final thoughts and questions for the day?
Well, one of the really important pieces that I want to share, and I'll do it in both, is, and it's a session that I actually gave at a big conference just before COVID hit, and it's what every board member wants every fundraiser to know and what every fundraiser wants every board member to know. And because I know for myself, I've been a board member, and I've drove away from a meeting going, what just happened? But I also know as a fundraiser that I've walked in my office, shut the door and thought, they're not paying attention, right? So I've been on both sides of it. So I have kind of a little list actually, well, kind of a big list about how each group sort of views the other group. And it's really meant to be very much in the space of trying to see the other side and make, move things forward.
Absolutely. Well, from my perspective, just kind of chipping in here, having been a small shop executive director for over 15 years within the environmental community, fundraising is one of the biggest challenges we face. And so having some of those tips and strategies for how to improve our work. But our biggest secret weapon in terms of, and I really don't want to talk so much about all these weapon analogies. I think I got to change some of my language here, boot camps and secret weapons. Sorry about that. But one of the biggest tricks that we have as an opportunity in the sector is to really work with our board when it comes to fund development. And we're not saying that board members are going to be sitting there at all the meetings and doing all the asking, right? That's not actually what executive directors need from their board necessarily. But there is a role for board members to play in terms of fundraising. And one of the roles is just to help keep us on track when it comes to strategy and where we're going. So setting a clear objectives for the organization, it makes fundraising a lot easier when you know where you're going. So taking that particular role is really valuable. And then again, taking care, we talked earlier about taking care of the meetings themselves, making them fun, but also making them impactful. Again, where are we talking about fund development at those board meetings, and how is it coming into the conversation on a regular basis? It's not something we should just be talking about once a year. We talk about the budget. It really has to be that consistent conversation that we're keeping at the top of the game. And I think that, you know, one of the things that my board members can do that really makes a difference for me is helping with thank you calls, or helping with thank you letters, or things that are more personal and in the terms of the connection to our donors. So there's a lot of opportunity there for board members to play a role, and it doesn't always have to be in the more intimidating ones. Like some people love asking for money. I'm one of those people. If someone wants to sit down and have tea with me and talk about our organization, and I'm going to ask them for $10,000, that doesn't intimidate me at all. I love that. So I don't necessarily need my board members to do that kind of role for me. But in terms of following up and, you know, sharing that story, I get paid as an executive director, right? So it's better for it to come from someone who's a volunteer. There's something really powerful that board members can express about their organizations because they're not being paid to say it, right? That's the bottom line. Board members are volunteers. So when you share your story about why you're a board member, to me, it is so much more powerful than any staff member sharing their story, because they are there voluntarily and it's not for a paycheck. So at the end of the day, I mean, I don't do my job just for a paycheck either, let's be honest. But I really do think that we underestimate the value of a board member's story. So if you know, I'm just thinking about one of the board meetings I went to a few years ago, and I asked the board members to go around the circle and share why they were there in the room. Like, what was it about that organization that brought them there? And I was so impressed. And actually that room, we were moved to tears by some of the stories of the people in the room. So if you don't know why your board members are there, and if the answer is always going to be, well, because Kristina asked me, or because I was dragged by this person, right? Like, we need to get beyond that and figure out, what is it about this message and this organization that keeps you coming back, even when there is, you know, like conflict, or some meetings aren't as fun or whatever. Like, try to remember what it is that brought you there. That can be so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. And I'll give everyone a bit of a heads up. Of course, Giving Tuesday is coming up on November the 30th. So that's a great way as well for board members to show a little love. You can share, you know, maybe the Giving Tuesday message for an organization that you're a board member with, or maybe you can give a gift for Giving Tuesday. It certainly will inspire your staff team or your volunteer team in the leadership role. It's been my honor and my pleasure to spend time with all of you today. I will always take an opportunity to spend time with Kristina. So thank you so much. And to Jody for sponsoring today's session, and really appreciate that as well. Thanks for your time today, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you hopefully next month. Take care.